Hey guys, Brad here. Before we start the show, I want to encourage you all to subscribe to the Millennial Mastermind podcast on Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcasting app. It's a great way to make sure that you never miss one of our most recent interviews. And while you're there, please leave a rating or review. It really helps others to find the show. Thanks.
Build a business for your ideal customer. Don't do what everybody does. Everybody has an idea, a great concept, and they build the business, and then they spend years trying to fit people into it. It's like a round peg in a square hole, right? And that's exactly how it feels. If you're frustrated with, I don't feel like my customers are the right customers, I don't have enough customers, the customers that I have don't want to pay me, all of those things are an indicator that you're not working with your ideal customer. Stop what you're doing and look and say, am I the right business in the right place, speaking the right language to the right people? Because if you're not, it is a hell of an uphill battle that you're never going to overcome.
In Napoleon Hill's timeless classic, Think and Grow Rich, he defines a mastermind group as the coordination of knowledge and effort between two or more people for the attainment of a definite purpose. In this podcast, that coordination is created between you, me, and our amazing guests. Our definite purpose is achieving extraordinary results in your business and your life. I'm your host, Brad Mulvey. Welcome to the Millennial Mastermind Podcast. Hello, Millennial Mafia. Welcome to the Millennial Mastermind Podcast. This is the show for entrepreneurial millennials who are looking for the tools, tactics, and inspiration to take your business and your life to the next level. Today's guest is Jeffrey Shaw. Jeffrey has been the go-to portrait photographer for an exclusive clientele for over 30 years. His portraits have appeared on The Oprah Show, CBS News, in O Magazine, People Magazine, and New York Family Magazine. Jeffrey is also the host of the popular business podcast Creative Warriors and a featured speaker on The Moth, which, if you guys haven't heard of, it's an absolutely fantastic storytelling podcast. In addition to his photography, Jeffrey now uses the skills he's developed over the past 30 years to help other businesses stand out, attract their ideal customers, and create brand loyalty that supersedes price. His new book, Lingo, Discover Your Ideal Customers' Secret Language and Make Your Business Irresistible, helps entrepreneurs truly understand their ideal customer, a concept that we can all benefit from by learning how to better engage our customers to increase loyalty and profits. So wow, with that bio, Jeffrey, welcome to the show.
Hey, Brad, I'm really glad to be here. And with your Millennial Mafia, this is like an audience that I'm so excited to reach. I don't get to talk to you guys. I've got three of my own, by the way. I've got three millennials of my own. So I'm just so excited. I'm so glad that you have a show that devoted to this audience. It's
Perfect.
Awesome.
Well, yeah, we're excited to talk to you as well because it sounds like you've done some really awesome things over the past couple years and what you're doing now with the new book and everything else. I think there's so much that you can speak to that's going to be really impactful for the Millennial Mafia. So thank you for taking the time to join us today.
Thrilled to be here.
So obviously walking through your bio, you've done a lot of impressive things, built a really cool, multiple really cool businesses. But is there anything that I may have missed in that bio or any gaps that you'd like to elaborate on before we really dive into it?
Not really. I mean, I've been an entrepreneur my whole life. I truly have never had a real job. I've never gotten a paycheck. I was selling eggs door to door when I was 14, driving around in my mother's car. I was too young. I was below the driving age, but I lived in the country, so nobody knew. But I would drive door to door and sell eggs. And I just have always had an entrepreneurial mind. And what really excites me about having the opportunity to speak to your Millennial Mafia is, hopefully we can get some really valuable information to your tribe early on. I find the concept of lingo and all that I talk about and teach is, really helpful and beneficial for people that have been out there in business a long time. But man, do I wish everybody got this information when they were starting out or much earlier in their career, because I didn't. and therefore it's learned by doing. And, so that's what I'm most excited about helping your audience out with is, get this information early on so that they can have the businesses they want.
Yeah, I think you're spot on there because you can spend a lot of time spinning your wheels, especially early on, but really at any point in the business trajectory, just doing the wrong things or focusing on those aspects of business that aren't going to provide the most return and the most bang for your buck. And so just kind of reading through some of your book summary and some of the work that you've done, I realized that you've really pinpointed some of those aspects that can help you stand out pretty early. And that's exactly where a lot of our audience members are. So yeah, I think we're on the same page there. So one part of your bio that I would love to dig into to start off is we talked about how you serve a very exclusive clientele with your photography business. So I was wondering if you could share kind of who exactly you target with that business, and how does one become the go-to portrait for a niche audience like that?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, mind you, and this is all the kind of the foundational story of the book Lingo, is that, I grew up lower middle class. So the fact that I ended up serving this very affluent clientele is as much of a surprise to me as it is to anybody. It almost doesn't make sense, except that's exactly what I teach in Lingo is what I understood. I was 3 years in business. I was 20 years old, got out of photography school, and went back to my hometown and started this this family portrait photography business. And what I considered was going to be high end only, but to be honest with you, Brad, at 20 years old, growing up lower middle class, I couldn't really define what high end meant, right?
Sure.
What does high end even mean? All I knew in the mid 80s was that, to make six figures was like the ultimate. So I figured, all right, I was going to reach people that, were close to making six figures. And, so I went back to my hometown to start this business and failed miserably for 3 years. And what I realized, and this story is all very laid out and detailed so people can really get the idea. What I realized is that I did what 95% of businesses, at least 95% of businesses, do wrong, which is why it's so important we get to your millennial mafia early, is that I built the business that I wanted without paying attention to who I was going to serve. Right? So I was speaking the wrong language to the wrong people. I was barking up the wrong tree. And it became clear to me what I was doing was I was offering a luxury product. What I had to offer as far as a photographer, and the idea that you're going to pay a lot of money for photographs and hand them down, and the importance of children's memories, it didn't resonate with the market that I was in, because people there struggle to make their rent. They struggle to get food on the table. Right? So there's no money left over for luxuries. And what I did was entirely a luxury product. So that's why I redesigned my business, relaunched it, renamed it, did everything over again, started it again 2 hours away from my hometown in an affluent town in Connecticut, and and did it the right way. I studied for 3 months. I studied, 3 months to start with in order to convince myself to make the transition, but then spent the rest of my 30 years continuing to perfect the understanding of my ideal customer's secret language. So I studied how to high-end brands think. And what I realized is that it doesn't matter if it's high end or low end or anything in between. As a business, as an entrepreneur, your connection to your client is by speaking their language. And what I mean by that, and what I mean by lingo, is you're speaking to their essence, right? You know them so well, you kind of know the thoughts that are in their head. You can finish their sentences for them, if you will. That's what I mean to actually speak someone's lingo. It's far deeper than demographics and statistics and buyer personas.
So how far do you think you have to kind of niche down to get to that level where you can start really focusing on such a detailed thing as their language? Is it something, because we often hear you should go a mile deep and an inch wide, not the other way around, and really focus on that very specific target. But I'd love to get kind of your thoughts on how niched we have to get to be able to actually get to a specific lingo or language for that audience.
Well, here's the thing. I actually, in the book, there's an entire chapter. It's called The New Niche, because I actually want to redefine it. Because the way it has been portrayed, and being a creative person myself, my whole life, the thing that has been most stifling is being told to niche down, to find one thing to do to one audience one audience to serve. And I work, with really creative-minded people and innovative entrepreneurs. And this is the thing that drives them most crazy. Like, it's paralyzing. So what I came to understand is that that was not appealing to me. It wasn't appealing to me to force myself into a box to decide on one group of people with one thing to do, because I've always had you read my bio. I've done a lot of different things. What if I'm going to say that there's a niche at all, and what I refer to as the new niche is to define your area of expertise. Okay, what is it that you are so good at? And I don't mean just a skill set. Right. So one of the first things we do in Lingo is to help readers define who their ideal customer is. You actually determine who your ideal customer is by first understanding what are your innate characteristics, like what makes you you. Who are you best to serve with? Now, ultimately, I go through a whole series of exercises and questions, and it comes down to one main question every time. Who would love that? Right? So how is it that you think? How is it that you function? What's your skill set? What's your area of expertise? And who would love that? And what you realize, there actually are multiple audiences that would love that about you. There are multiple audiences that could take benefit from your skill set and your area of expertise. So to me, the new niche is this broader area of expertise. So yeah, in a way you go a mile deep and inch wide, but more about yourself. You go a mile wide saying, what am I really good at? Who am I really, what are my innate characteristics? Who would love that? And then you go wide. You say, wow, this audience would love that. That audience would love it. This audience would love that. And you realize you can actually create a much more expansive business model that way.
That's really interesting, and it's an awesome new perspective. So one thing that I know sometimes I personally struggle with, so there may be a few other listeners out there who are in the same boat, is trying to figure out exactly what it is that you're awesome at. Because I know, what I love and what I'm passionate about and what I'm getting good at, but sometimes that's an area that I try to figure out, okay, what am I really, really good at? Do you have any suggestions, or do you mention anything in the book on how to get to that?
Well, and some of it is just time. It is, to be honest with you, this is why you hire a coach, right? I mean, this is why you reach out, because it's really hard to do that yourself. Because here's the thing, we're so close to who we are, right? Mm-hmm. It's really hard to see ourselves. Right. One of my favorite branding experts is Sally Hogshead. And if you're not familiar with Sally's work, she's written a number of books, but you could say her area of expertise as a branding expert is helping brands and businesses determine what the world finds fascinating about them. And it also works for individuals too. Like what is, because we see ourselves by our own limiting beliefs of ourselves. We can also only even expect of ourselves what we've predetermined we're capable of, because that's what expectations is. I mean, expectation is a predetermined outcome. So we're actually limited by our own expectations of what we think we're capable of. We limit ourselves by who we think we are. Really, this is where we need outside help, because other people can see more in us than we can see in ourselves. And there's actually a whole chapter about that in the book, which seems like it wouldn't be in a business book, but I call it the validation paradox, because the paradox is that we're always looking to find ourselves, but we actually need others to do that. Right. So this is where you really need to engage in help, so that it doesn't take years and years and years of you figuring out what you're really good at. You need a mirror, right? You need that person who can point out to you, as I do all the time as a business coach. It's like, I'm at least going to point you in this direction, that this seems like a really interesting thing that you're good at. I can give you a real life example. I have a coaching client who's super successful. He's started and founded a number of companies, and one, a creative agency he started about 15 years ago, and he recently left that agency, just due to frustrations and wanting to change up his life. But it really was a blank page. When he reached out to me for coaching, he had no idea what his next steps were in life, but he had a wealth of experience, and that can be the puzzling part. It's sort of like having a lot of passions. Having a lot of experience is just as stifling, because you don't know where to begin. And ultimately, as I looked at his experience, his primary function, you could say, in his most recent company was as CFO. But the role of a CFO, as he did it, was also very much a COO, and a little touch of a CEO, and definitely a CMO, and all these C-suite. So what we did is we actually put this together. His area of expertise is his ability to wear the hats of many C-suite positions. So we created a brand for him around what we call a CXO. Fill in the blank, right? So he is a CXO. So he could be the CMO, CEO, CFO, COO for any company on a temporary basis. So he now has a brand and a business where he takes short-term contracts to fill in a C-suite position for large, medium, and small businesses that need that work, right? So it's you're carving out a space for yourself that's so unique. That's what makes you stand out.
I love it, and I think that a lot of times it's hard to sometimes admit that you need to bounce ideas off somebody else or rely on somebody else for their feedback on yourself. We try to know ourselves as best we can, but like you said, there's so many limiting beliefs that sometimes we don't even realize we have, and I'm sure oftentimes that's the case. So that's
if we don't, honestly, Brad, if we don't get help, we're shortchanging ourselves because we never see ourselves as fully as we're actually capable of.
So I want to change gears back to this whole concept around language and lingo within whoever you're trying to serve, whatever that audience is. So how does that affect a business? And specifically, if you could talk about kind of those early stages and somebody who's either thinking about launching a business or in the early stages of entrepreneurship. How important is that, and how can people start to get their thumb on what that language is and where they can find it?
Yeah. So it starts with first understand there's a good chance that your ideal customer, there's a good chance there's a part of that customer in who you already are, right? So I literally am an extreme example because while I ended up photographing really wealthy people and there was no wealth in my family, like I don't come from that background at all. The fact of the matter is I actually have a tremendous amount in common with that clientele when it comes to mindset and values, right? So for example, I always, since I was a little kid, I was always a really long-term thinker. I had life insurance when I was 19 years old. I was always thinking way down the road, always planning. To this day, I'm just not a spontaneous guy. Everything's planned out way ahead for me. I show up to the airport 3 hours early. Like, it's just who I am. And, think about it. When you have a lot of money, when you have extra money, when you're affluent, you have the ability to save towards the future. Your kids' educations are paid before they're born. You have life insurance. You're always planning ahead. That's what money gives you, the freedom to plan ahead. Now, whether you choose to or not probably has something to do with your own personal characteristics. But when you have the money, you have the ability. That's why, like, my clients pay for their photo shoots at least a year in advance, right? Because, I have a waiting list. It's not a year long, but they just want to get on the book. Right? They want to know that it's taken care of. They can afford it. They can lay out a few $1,000s a year ahead of time because they won't miss it. But if you don't have money, you can't do that. Right? So by nature, just by pure values, it's like, man, I don't get my family. I didn't get the people in my hometown because I'm sitting there thinking, of course you want photographs of your family. Like, you need to be thinking about 2 generations ahead when you're going to hand these things down. But if you're struggling to put food on your table, you're not thinking that way. Right? So, to define your ideal customer, like I said, go back to that fundamental question, like, who would love that? Like, who would love, in my case, like my extreme attention to detail? Who would love my long-term thinking? Right? So that's a place that your millennial mafia wants to start. Like, who are you and who would love that? You don't have to change yourself. I often make this comparison to comedians. There are really vulgar comedians and there are not vulgar comedians, right? They're not for everybody. A vulgar comedian is not for everybody,
right?
But has a significant audience that loves that, right? So who's your audience? Like, who would love who you are, right? So you kind of that's really, Brad. That's really where you want to start, because as I said, the concept here is you want to build a business for a specific group of people, because as you learn how their mindset, as you learn their values, as you learn their perspective in the world, and then you can market yourself speaking their secret language, which is the 5-step strategy that Lingo teaches. You can build a business and a brand speaking their secret language. It's almost as if that they're the only ones that hear it. So you end up with a business where you're only working with your ideal customers, because by creating a brand and business that speaks the secret language of your ideal customer, you magnetize them and you filter out the rest. It's bonding. It's like creating a bond.
So once you have that audience, that group really nailed down, you know exactly who they are. You've identified that there's maybe some similarities within your own personality, or you are part of that group exactly. How do you go about really making sure that you're incorporating that language or that lingo? How do you make sure that you are speaking their language and you're solidifying that bond and you're starting to really, start doing the things that speaking that language, all the benefits that come with it of earning their trust, and really making the connection? Kind of where do you start at that point, I guess?
Okay. So I'll give you a brief overview of the 5 steps, because I think that'll answer that
Wonderful.
question. But I also really like what you had just said about, here's why I'm out here, and this is why I've written the book, and this is why I'm excited to speak to your Millennial Mafia, is because I think what Lingo teaches is so incredibly important for the future of business. And you guys have a lot of years ahead of you, right? In the world of entrepreneurship, you guys have decades ahead of you. And that's why I'm excited to be here talking to you. And this is why I think this is imperative information, because consumers of the future are going to demand this level of understanding who they are, understanding their essence, before they're going to surrender any of their money. We're not going to get by on just knowing their buying behavior and their demographics and their statistics anymore. The demand keeps getting high. I've been in business for 33 years. The demand keeps getting higher as to how much people want you to know them before they give you their trust.
Totally believe it.
Yeah, I mean, the game has really been up, because there's a suspicion now, right? There's a suspicion because of the way we're being trolled and the way we're being followed on Facebook and all the things that are going. So there's a real suspicion now, which has raised the bar to say, you know what, you're not getting a dime of my money until you prove that you get me. Not that you're running an algorithm on me, but that you get who I am. Right? So that's why this has really been upped. So here's the 5. I'll give you a brief overview of the 5 steps. The first we kind of covered, and it is understanding their perspective. You can't go past go until you understand what the world looks like from your ideal customer's perspective. You just can't, right? I'm 53 years old. I have 3 millennials. I love speaking to my kids because I love the millennial perspective. Honestly, Brad, and I'm not just blowing steam here, you guys are the generation. I truly believe that. I get so angry when I hear people talk about millennials being entitled. I'm like, are you kidding me? They're the first generation to have the audacity to not settle for the crap that every generation before them has settled for, right? They're the first generation to not stay in jobs that are dead-end jobs for a paycheck. They're the first generation to not stay in relationships because they're not fulfilled. Good for them. The 40 and 50-year-olds need to stop whining because they didn't live their life that way.
I think you guys got it. Chanting our battle cry. So
you guys got it right? So that's why I'm so excited to have an opportunity to reach you guys directly, because you guys are getting it right. But so you got to understand the perspective. The business, those 40s and 50-year-olds that are complaining is because they're not taking the time to understand the perspective. I actually have done a lot of work to understand the perspective of what the world looks like from you guys. I totally get why Snapchat is big. I totally get why streaming is big. I get it. So no matter who you're serving, you want to understand what their perspective is. It doesn't have to be as challenging as my challenge was, because I was going to serve an affluent clientele that I didn't come from. But it may be that, hey, as a millennial, you might be early 30s now, but you might be building a technology for 20-year-olds, right? So there's a chance that who you are today, a part of your ideal customer is still in you, right? So you just kind of have to get what is their perspective. So that's first and most important. You have to understand the perspective of your ideal customer. Second, in order to speak their secret language and really get in there, you got to create an environment that's already familiar to them. And this really is important, particularly for the millennials. It's like you can't attract a millennial buyer with old fuddy-dud, branding. I watch Adult Swim so that I can get the humor of millennials. And I find a lot of the Bob's Burgers. I find a lot of these shows hysterical. And I watch them because it's like that helps me get into that mindset. It's like, it's the humor, it's the cutting to the chase. You have to create an environment that's familiar. Now, for me, serving the affluent, I had to create environments, meaning my website, my marketing materials. I had a brick and mortar store. I had to create environments online and offline that were familiar to that clientele. What's familiar to an affluent clientele is, very cut and dry, clean, warm lighting. They don't shop at Walmart and Kmart. Their stores don't look like that. They shop at Neiman Marcus. Right? So you have to create environments that are familiar to your ideal customer, because familiarity creates comfort. The moment people feel comfortable, they're like, oh, this business is for me. All right. Very powerful. Third step is style. Right? You have to, whether the style is hipster, whether it's, whatever. Abercrombie and Fitch is always an example, and I talk about them in the book as a brand. It's fascinating. You millennials, probably most of you don't know that Abercrombie and Fitch was originally a brand for old men. Right? They sold tweeds. I think like Theodore Roosevelt bought a tweed jacket from Abercrombie and Fitch, and they were such an old-fashioned. It's amazing to see how they've transferred and transitioned their business into who their market is today. Totally based on the style of the clothes, the style of their marketing, the style of their stores. Completely changed their market. So that gives you power to decide. Like, once you know who your ideal customer is, what their perspective is, you want to speak in their style. Don't be old fuddy-dud if they're cool and hip, or vice versa, right? Mm-hmm. Really important to because I refer to style as the decision maker. We make decisions. You guys probably more than anybody. You guys make decisions in 7 seconds or less. You go to a website, boom, I'm not going to vacation there, or I'm not going to stay there. Or you walk down any mall or any main street, you scan to the left and the right, and you immediately make a decision on what brands and businesses resonate for you. Right, so style is the call out. So whether it's a website, brick and mortar, your marketing materials, your email marketing, if you want to stop your ideal customer in their tracks, it better start with feeling like, cool, that's my style.
Yep, makes a lot of sense. You got to play into that short attention span that us as human beings now have.
Yeah, and it's only going to get shorter because it's the way we operate. Again, I have no criticism of it. I've never criticized my kids about having their cell phones at the table. In fact, they usually criticize me. It's like, it's just part of our life. I don't think we should go around changing it. I mean, usually my kids are yelling at me to get off Facebook at dinner. So, but to me, it's like this is just a reality. And there's actually been science to show that since the invention of, not only was human nature, the attention span getting shorter, it actually follows and parallels the advancement of mobile technology. It's kind of fascinating. You can actually see the increase of technology and the decrease of attention span simultaneously at the same time. This is not going to improve.
Right.
Our attention spans are not going to improve. So style literally stops people in there. The example I give in Lingo is you go to any discount store like a TJ Maxx or something like that, and all the shirts, all the men's mediums, which is what I would wear, are in one rack, right? But they're not split by designers. It's just like all the mediums. And you flip through there, think about what causes you to stop. That style looks like me, right? You bypass all the things hanging on a hanger that aren't you, right? Aren't speaking your language, but you stop on the one that speaks your language.
Yep.
Right? So that's the importance of style as far as it being part of the secret language. And then the fourth step is price. Pricing psychology is so unbelievably fascinating to me and powerful because pricing creates perception. One of the exercises I do with my coaching clients is when we start working on their pricing model. First thing I ask them is come up with 3 to 5 words that describe the perception you want people to get from your pricing. Right? Do you want people to perceive you as affordable? Do you want people to perceive you as, not just expensive, but maybe a rare occasion, right? Or do you want people to perceive your brand, your business as, every day? Look at the difference between like Walmart and Target. They don't seem like they're worlds apart, but they're actually worlds apart because Walmart has their language is cost conscious. They do everything they can to focus on the cost. That's why they have whole marketing campaigns about rollback prices. Everything in the store is priced to like the 100th of a cent. Heavy duty concentration on price. Where Target not serving a dramatically different audience, but definitely a very different value. It's less about price conscious and more value conscious. Their ideal customer just wants to feel like they're getting a designer name for less money. Doesn't have to be cheap. It just has to be less than what they think they would have to pay for if they weren't with that designer directly.
So I think price is an interesting area too, where when you talk about limiting beliefs, I think that really starts to play in when you start pricing products, especially early on. But it's also, like you mentioned, a very powerful tool to change the perception of where your brand currently stands, whether it's you're pricing yourself out as a beginner or as an expert. And I think that price has a lot of play in that.
And what I would tell your mafia to think about pricing this way. Like, first of all, understand its power and don't be afraid of it. Use it to position your business. The truth of the matter is that good pricing strategy is, again, a magnet for your ideal customer. A lot of us, we get afraid of pricing because we're afraid that we're going to deter people. We're thinking, if I'm too high, I'm going to turn people away. If I'm too low, people are going to think that I'm not good enough, right? So that's why we freak out about pricing. Get the power here, right? Put those emotions aside, gain the power here, and decide what's the perception you want people to have, and then price yourself for that perception so that, again, you are drawing in your ideal customer. If you're deterring anybody, you're deterring the people you don't want to work with anyway.
I love that. I think that's such a key point, that it's a great way to kind of weed out those people who ultimately you don't want to be working with. So that is a home run point.
Yeah. I talking about statistics. So y'all, the term, the 1%ers, right? The people making 1% of income in the United States. Statistically speaking, when those statistics, what designates someone as a 1%er? I mean, statistically, my photography clientele is a half of the 1%. Right? Based on their earnings and their assets, they're about half of 1%. What does that mean, Brad? That means 99.5% of the world is a no for me.
Mm-hmm.
I only have 0.5 of the U.S., audience that actually can afford me. But that's a big number. Half of 1% is way more people than I could ever handle.
Right.
Right. And then of course, then you got to narrow it down. Well, geographically, I want to work within this area. Well, geographically, you might only want to work in this area. My primary base is the Northeast. I now live in Miami Beach, but I'm from New York City. That's where I built my business. So my primary area was the Northeast. Now, granted, they were a type of people that took me all over the world to photograph them, but they're my primary base. But you know what? There's a whole lot of, half of 1%ers in the Northeast, and more than I could ever serve. Right. So 99.5% of the world is a no for me, and it is for every one of your audience as well. It's like most of the people are a no for you. You're trying, by speaking the secret language of an ideal customer, you're bringing in the right people. I talk in the book about busting up the Pareto principle. The Pareto principle is the 80-20 rule, which says 80% of your income comes from 20% of your customers. Brad, I don't know about you, but I do not have time to waste on 8 out of 10 customers being wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Who has the time?
Right.
It takes too much time and energy to get a customer, and 8 out of 10 of them aren't going to be worth it. Hell no. So that's why, today's business, for your mafia, they need to really embrace, and that's what my whole book Lingo is about you working with your ideal customer. Put all your effort into speaking their secret language so you only work with ideal customers. Make every customer pay off in a big way. And pricing is a huge part of that. All right, so quickly, because I don't want to keep you forever, but the last step is words. So you can't even begin to develop the word strategy, the marketing materials, your website. Honestly, you can't even begin that until you've done the other 4 steps. Like, you can't speak someone's language until you've learned sentence structure, and it's like any other foreign language. You can't speak the language until you've done the work to understand the components that make up that language. That's why I put words as the 5th step. It's like, now you're empowered to use in powerful marketing terms and pose what I refer to as self-identifying questions, like asking the questions in your marketing materials and in your branding that triggers an emotional response from your customer. Their response, the biggest compliment you can get is when someone says to you, "Man, it's like you're in my head." It's like, and you kind of want to like, do you kind of like this, you want mysterious music to play and your fingers tapping each other. It's like, ha ha ha, yes, I am in your head, but not in a manipulative way. It's actually in an incredibly empathetic and caring way. Like you've done your homework. You've done your homework to know their perspective, know what's familiar to them, their style, and what price point triggers them. You've done all that work. It should make your ideal customer feel like, holy crap, it's like you're in my head. It's like, thank you. That is the ultimate compliment.
Amazing. So once you have those 5 steps in place, where do you, I guess from there, how do you bring it all together to appropriately use this language to serve that audience?
Great question. I'm so glad you asked it too, because to me, it all comes together in the brand and services that you create, right? So you could say brand services. It's basically come to what's the business? So one of the things, there's a course that goes along with the book called the Lingo course. And one of the really simple questions, and it's a powerful course because it's you do a lot of soul searching. There's a lot of questions you have to answer. One of the questions I answer, and that I pose, it's amazing that businesses don't ask this question of themselves. Is your ideal customer price conscious or time conscious? That is a huge difference. When you know the answer to that, Brad, you actually know how to design your business. If your customer is time conscious, which most people are nowadays. Most people, it's funny, when business isn't going well, we blame it on money. We blame it on the economy. We blame it on people not having enough money or that they're cheap. It's rarely the case. And I've been in business for 33 years. I will tell you, money is rarely you just haven't proven the money. You haven't proven what you're offering to be worth the money, right? But by and large, especially today, people will pay more for you to save them time. And I know this firsthand. Again, 33 years ago, when I started out as a photographer, my photo shoots were 3 hours long, and I was always expensive. So I justified being expensive by the fact that people had a lot of my time. 3-hour photo shoots. Sometimes I stayed for lunch. It was a long, drawn-out process. I saturated them with service so that they felt like, okay, it was worth the money. Mm-hmm. Right? Nowadays, it's like they want me in and out so fast, they will pay me more to see me less. Like now the value is in me making their life easy. So I've had to learn to shoot differently so I can get in and out in 45 minutes if that's what it takes. I had to turn around quicker because nobody wants to wait for handcrafted items and they have to wait 3 months for. Bullcrap. Like they don't care. I want quality and I want it now. Yep. Right? So nobody wants to make a compromise on the quality. They just want it faster. So most consumers are more time conscious today than they are money conscious. Right. So when you know that, you have to design your brand and first you design your brand to attract the time conscious customer. Here's one of the things I do. I heavily promote my cell phone number for texting to my ideal customer. It's one of the first things if a new customer reaches out for photography, the first thing we ask them is, what is your preferred method of communication? And it's not, honestly, Brad, between you and I, it's not because I want to do what they want. It's because what they choose tells me a lot about who they are. When they say, it'd be best if you text me, I do a high five. I'm like, that's awesome. I love the texting customer because they don't have time to nitpick everything. They don't breathe over my shoulder. They're living their life in their way that they'll shoot off a couple texts and they leave me to do my job and they leave me alone with full creative freedom to be awesome. Right? So I do everything I can to call forward the texting customer because I want the time conscious customer. So when you know that, then you got to, how easy is it to navigate your website? For me and for a lot of time-conscious businesses, you want to have paying you super easy. My customers pay their invoices at 2-3 o'clock in the morning because that's the first time they've had, or they're in different time zones because they're traveling the world, right? So online payment part. So when you understand as something as simple as one question, is your ideal customer money conscious or time conscious, can tell you entirely how to build your business. If your ideal customer is time conscious, then you better build a business and services that cater to that need. That's speaking their language.
Jeffrey, I know we're bumping up against the time limit here. So before I ask you the final question, could you give us anywhere or point our listeners in the right direction to find out more about you or the book? If they really just want to learn more about the 5 steps and how Lingo can impact their business?
Yeah, absolutely. So actually what we've put together for your Millennial Mafia is a Lingo Media Kit. Because, I don't want to just send people on my website. I don't care. I want to give you something. The Lingo Media Kit is awesome. They can get that at jeffreyshaw.com/millennial. And in that Lingo Media Kit is an infographic of the 5 steps to create the secret language that I explained to you. So now you've got a visual of it. It includes a free chapter of the book, which is the book. It's not the first chapter because that's too cheesy. It's the chapter. That's just too easy. It's the chapter on perspective, which is the most important one, right? So if I'm going to give you a free chapter, I want to give you the most important one. And there's also an audio version of that chapter, which is really cool. It actually has additional stories in it and sound effects. So again, jeffreyshaw.com/millennial. And that will give them the Lingo Media Kit. Grab that. It's a great place to start to get to know more about my work.
Great. Well, for the last question, I would love to understand, you know, obviously you've learned a ton over the past 30 years and working with your audience and truly understanding everything about them to the point where you can truly speak their language and you have their lingo nailed down pat. If you had to go back to when you were just starting off, and give yourself one piece of advice that would help ease that learning curve and get you to the top of that journey a lot faster. Is there one piece of advice you give to yourself in the early stages of the business?
I fear sounding redundant, but I guess it just can't be said enough. To build a business for your ideal customer. Don't do what everybody does. Everybody has an idea, a great concept, and they build the business, and then they spend years trying to fit people into it. It's like a round peg in a square hole, right? And that's exactly how it feels. If you're frustrated with, I don't feel like my customers are the right customers, I don't have enough customers, the customers that I have don't want to pay me, all of those things are an indicator that you're not working with your ideal customer. Stop what you're doing and look and say, am I the right business in the right place, speaking the right language to the right people? Because if you're not, it is a hell of an uphill battle that you're never going to overcome. You can, and you know what? Then you spend the rest of your life selling. The magic, I cannot tell you, Brad, the magic that happens when you build a business speaking the secret language of your ideal customer that just resonates for them, and it's like you're only speaking to them. You can't imagine how easy business is. You're not selling yourself because they're identifying for themselves, man, that's the business I want to do business with. It's remarkably simple and easy when you build your business. So my number one advice is stop what you're doing and assess whether you're speaking the right language to the right people.
Yeah, and I think it's so important. So I'm glad you kind of hammer home that point, because there's so much difficulty that comes along with targeting the wrong person, even if you're doing it subconsciously. So I appreciate you elaborating on that point. Jeffrey, thanks so much for stopping by today. On behalf of myself and in the entire Millennial Mafia audience, this was a great conversation. I think that it couldn't have come at a better time for myself, and I think that some listeners are going to feel the same, of making sure that we're focusing on the right audience, and our entire our style, our pricing, our branding is all targeted at the right group. So thank you for being here.
You just completely inspired an idea, because I am counting on you guys. Honestly, I am counting on you, your generation, and I stand behind your generation 100%. You inspire me. It's like, man, if we get enough response from your audience, like how cool would it be for me to form a coaching group specifically for millennials that are at the early stages of business? I don't have a specific coaching opportunity for startups or early on. Most of the people that I coach have been out there and struggling, and I'm the fix-it guy. I'm the one they come to fix. But man, how cool would it be to actually get a group going of entrepreneurs like yourself that are at the earlier stages and get the right information, get put on track early on. Oh, God, I would love to save you guys the time, because we need you guys quick. This world is not necessarily going in the direction we want it to, and we need you guys to show up. And I've always believed that entrepreneurs can lead the way, because we have a tremendous amount of contact with a huge amount of people. We have impact, and we're counting on you millennial entrepreneurs to make that impact. Well, so go for it.
I couldn't agree with you more, and I hope that you do see that response, and I think that there's a lot of value that you have to offer to that audience. So,
well, pull together a tribe, Brad, and we'll do it.
Let's do it. Let's make it happen.
Let's make it happen.
All right, thanks, Jeffrey. We'll definitely work on that one.
All right, cool. Thanks, Brad.
Hey guys, thanks for tuning into that episode with Jeffrey Shaw. What a guy. And Jeffrey and I got to talking a little bit after the episode. And if anybody is interested in getting together for a group coaching type program, shoot me an email at brad@millennialmm.com. That's brad@millennialmm.com. And just include the word Jeffrey in the subject line. And let me know you're interested. And if there are enough people, then Jeffrey and I are going to get something together. So would love to hear from you. And I know that both him and I are really excited about that potential opportunity to help some young millennial entrepreneurs. So guys, had a great time hanging out with you today. Can't wait to see you next time. Thanks.